My name is Esther Bellamy. I am 76 years old. And the day they told me to be quiet was the day I finally found my voice. Before I tell you how it happened, let me ask you something. If you love real stories like this, stories about pain, strength, and women who refuse to disappear, please subscribe to this channel. Like this video, turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next part. And tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, so I know who is sitting with me right now. Now listen carefully. Because the moment I opened my mouth, everything changed. Please don't start again. That's what my son said. He didn't shout. He didn't even look angry. He said it calmly, like he was tired of hearing the same noise over and over. That noise was me. We were sitting in my living room, the one I paid for, the one I cleaned with these old hands, the one where I raised my children. My daughter sat beside him, her arms folded tight. My grandson was on the floor with his phone, pretending not to listen. I had just asked a simple question. Why didn't anyone tell me? Silence followed. Then my daughter sighed and said the words that made my heart drop. Mom, it's not that deep. Not that deep. I felt my chest tighten. Then explain it to me, I said. My son rubbed his forehead. That's the problem, you keep asking questions. I blinked. Since when is that a problem? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes scared me. Annoyance. Not concern. Not care. Annoyance. We're just trying to keep things calm, he said. You get emotional. That word again. Emotional. The word people use when they want you silent. I am not emotional, I said slowly. I am confused. My daughter leaned forward. Mom, please, just let it go. Let it go. Something inside me broke quietly. I looked around the room, at my family, the people I stayed alive for, the people I gave everything to. And suddenly, I understood. They didn't want peace. They wanted quiet. Let me take you back. I was not always this woman they speak over. I used to have a voice. I was loud once. I laughed hard. I argued. I stood my ground. But life has a way of teaching women like me to soften, then shrink. I married young. I loved deeply. I sacrificed without counting. When things got hard, I stayed quiet to keep the house together. When money was short, I worked more and complained less. When my children needed help, I said yes even when my body said no. I thought that was love. But every time I swallowed my words, my voice grew smaller. Until one day, they stopped hearing it at all. Back in the living room, my daughter stood up. We've already talked about this, she said. My heart skipped. Talked about what? She hesitated. My son answered instead. About what's best. Best for who? For you, he said. I felt dizzy. What do you mean? I asked. My daughter looked away. You don't need to worry about everything anymore. The room felt cold. I am not a child, I said. No one said that, my son replied quickly. But you're acting like it, I said. That's when he said it. The sentence that changed everything. We just think you should stop talking so much and let us handle things. Stop talking. Let us handle things. I stared at him. You want me quiet, I whispered. He didn't deny it. My daughter said softly, it's easier that way. Easier. For them. Not for me. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I carried this family on my back, I said, and now you want me silent. My grandson finally looked up. Grandma, it's not like that. Then what is it like? I asked. No one answered. That silence told me more than words ever could. That night, I did not sleep. Their words replayed in my head. Stop talking. Let us handle it. It's easier that way. I sat on my bed in the dark and whispered to myself, when did my voice become a problem? I realized something painful. They didn't want my opinion. They wanted my compliance. And that scared me more than anything. Because people who want you quiet usually have plans they don't want you to question. The next morning, I noticed something strange. A door in the hallway was locked. A door that had never been locked before. My heart started beating fast. I stood there staring at it, my hand hovering over the handle. Behind that door was something they didn't want me to see. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because the moment they asked me to be quiet was the moment I started listening harder than ever. And what I was about to discover next was the reason they wanted my voice gone in the first place. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I stood in that hallway for a long time, staring at the locked door. The house was quiet, but my head was loud. My heart beat hard in my chest, like it was warning me not to walk away. That door had never been locked before, not once in all the years I had lived in that house. I raised my hand and touched the knob. Cold. I tried to turn it gently. It didn't move. My fingers trembled. Why is this locked? I whispered to myself. I stepped back, suddenly afraid of what the answer might be. All my life I had trusted my family, trusted them with my home, trusted them with my heart, trusted them with my silence. And now there was something in my own house I was not allowed to see. That thought made my chest hurt. I walked back to my room slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. My knees felt weak. I pressed my palms together and tried to calm myself. Don't jump to conclusions, I told myself. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong. Later that morning, my daughter came into the kitchen while I was making tea. She smiled like everything was normal, like the night before had never happened. You didn't sleep well, she said. I slept, I replied. That's all. She poured herself coffee and avoided my eyes. You worry too much. I worry because things are being hidden from me, I said. She stiffened. What do you mean? I looked at her. Why is the hallway door locked? Her smile disappeared. That, she said quickly. Oh, that's nothing. Nothing doesn't need a lock, I replied. She sighed, like I was a child asking too many questions. We're just organizing things. Organizing what? I asked. She waved her hand. Important stuff. Important to who? I pressed. She turned her back to me. Mom, please, this is what I mean, you keep pushing. Pushing for answers, I said, in my own house. She set her cup down hard. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I watched her walk away, my heart heavy. Nothing. That word kept echoing in my head. If it was nothing, why did it feel like everything? That afternoon, my son came home early. He barely greeted me. He went straight to the hallway and stood in front of the locked door, blocking it with his body when he saw me watching. That was all the proof I needed. What's in there? I asked quietly. He sighed. Mom, not now. When then? I asked. He rubbed his face. You're tired, you should rest. Rest. Always that word. I don't need rest, I said. I need honesty. He looked at me for a long moment. You wouldn't understand. That sentence cut deep. I raised you, I said. When did I stop understanding? He didn't answer. He just turned the key in the lock and went inside, closing the door behind him. I stood there shaking. They were not just asking me to be quiet. They were pushing me out. That evening, my grandson came into my room. Grandma, he said softly, are you mad? I shook my head. No, baby, I'm thinking. He sat beside me. Mom says you're stressed. I smiled sadly. I'm not stressed, I'm waking up. He frowned. To what? I looked at his young face and felt my heart ache. To the truth. He didn't understand, and I didn't explain. Some things children should not carry. That night, I lay awake again. The house felt different now. Not warm, not safe. It felt like a place where decisions were being made without me. I listened carefully. Around midnight, I heard whispers. Low voices. Urgent voices. I held my breath and listened. "We need to be careful," my daughter whispered. "She's starting to notice," my son replied. My heart stopped. "We should have moved faster," my daughter said. "Moved faster. She asks too many questions," my son said. "We can't let her ruin this." Ruin what? My hands were shaking so badly, I had to press them against the mattress. "What if she finds out?" my daughter asked. "She won't," my son replied. "She won't go against us." Against us. I felt cold all over. They were talking about me like I was the enemy. Like I was something in the way. I lay there in the dark. Tears slipping down my face, but I didn't make a sound. I remembered all the times I had stayed quiet to keep peace. All the times I had swallowed my words so my children could feel comfortable. And now, my silence had made them bold. That night, I understood something painful. They were not afraid of my weakness. They were afraid of my voice. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calm inside me. My heart still hurt, but my fear had changed shape. It was no longer paralyzing. It was sharpening. I got dressed slowly and opened my old handbag. Inside was a small key ring with keys I had not used in years. Old drawer keys, old storage keys, things people forget about. I turned them in my palm. A thought crossed my mind that made my breath catch. What if one of these opens that door? I sat there for a long time, holding those keys, arguing with myself. If I opened that door, everything would change. If I didn't, I would stay in the dark forever. Later that day, my daughter came into my room. "We need to talk," she said. I nodded. "I agree." She sat on the bed across from me. "You've been quiet." I looked at her. "Isn't that what you wanted?" She frowned. "Don't be like that." "Like what?" I asked. "Aware." She sighed. "We're just trying to protect you." "From what?" I asked. She hesitated. "From stress." "No," I said softly. "From truth." She stood up suddenly. "You're twisting everything." "I'm finally seeing it clearly," I replied. She pointed toward the hallway. "That room is not your concern." That sentence told me everything. "My life is my concern," I said. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. That night, after everyone went to bed, I stood in the hallway again. The house was silent. I reached into my bag and pulled out the old key ring. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would give me away. I tried the first key. It didn't fit. The second. Nothing. My hands were sweating now. I tried a third. The lock clicked. I froze. The sound was loud in the quiet house. I held my breath, waiting for footsteps. Nothing. Slowly, carefully, I turned the knob. The door began to open. And in that moment, before I even saw what was inside, I knew one thing for sure. They didn't want me quiet because I was confused. They wanted me quiet because I was right. And whatever was behind that door was the reason they were so afraid of my voice. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The door opened slowly, and the air inside that room felt different. Cold. Still. Heavy. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob, my heart beating so loud I was sure the whole house could hear it. The light from the hallway spilled into the room just enough for me to see boxes stacked against the walls, neatly arranged, labeled. Too neat. This was not storage. This was planning. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. The smell of paper and dust filled my nose. Old paper, important paper, the kind people hide when they don't want questions. I walked toward the nearest box and knelt down slowly, my knees aching. On the side of the box, written in dark marker, was my name. Esther Bellamy. Seeing my name like that made my chest tighten. I opened the box. Inside were folders, many of them all with dates, all recent. Some had sticky notes attached, some had writing in my daughter's handwriting, some in my son's. I picked one up with shaking hands and opened it. My heart sank. There were papers inside that I had never seen before. Letters, notes, lists, words jumped out at me. Care plan, decision support, temporary arrangements. Temporary for who? I flipped through the pages slowly, forcing myself to read every word, even when my eyes started to burn. They had written about my health, about my age, about how emotional stress affected me, about how I struggled to let go of control. Control. That word hurt. I had given up control years ago, quietly, slowly, for them. I kept reading. There were notes about my money, about bills I had paid my whole life, about assisting me with decisions, about what was best for me. Not once did I see my voice in those pages. Not once did I see a question mark. Everything was decided. I sat back on my heels, my head spinning. So this is why, I whispered. This was why they wanted me quiet. I reached for another folder. This one was thicker. Inside were papers that made my hands shake harder. There were forms. Forms with lines for signatures. 2 lines were already signed. My daughter's name. My son's name. The 3rd line was blank. Mine. My breath caught in my throat. They expected me to sign this. They were waiting for me to be tired enough, confused enough, quiet enough. I felt tears slide down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall onto the papers. I trusted you, I whispered. I trusted you with my life. I trusted you with my silence. I stayed there for a long time, sitting on the floor of that room, holding those papers like they were something alive, something dangerous. Then I heard a sound. Footsteps. My heart jumped. I hurriedly placed the papers back where I found them. I closed the folder, stacked everything exactly the way it had been, and stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I unlocked the door just enough to slip out and closed it behind me, turning the lock back into place. Then I walked to my room and shut my door. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. My whole body felt numb. All those years. All that love. And this was how it ended. No. I shook my head slowly. This was not the end. This was the moment. The moment I understood something I had never allowed myself to see before. They did not want me quiet because I was weak. They wanted me quiet because I was inconvenient. Because my voice could stop their plans. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my name on those folders, saw the signatures, saw the blank line waiting for mine. In the early morning hours, I sat up in bed and whispered to myself. They wanted me to be quiet, and I was. For years. But not anymore. The next day, I moved differently. I spoke less. I watched more. At breakfast, my daughter smiled and asked, "Did you sleep okay?" "Yes," I said simply. She looked relieved. My son asked, "You need anything today?" "No," I replied. They both relaxed a little. They thought my silence meant obedience. It didn't. It meant preparation. That afternoon, I went into my room and pulled out an old notebook, one I used to write prayers in years ago. I opened it and began to write. I wrote dates. I wrote words. I wrote exactly what I saw in that room. Because if they were building a story about me, I needed my own record. Later, my grandson knocked on my door. "Grandma," he said softly, "Mom says you should rest." I smiled at him. "I am resting, baby." That wasn't a lie. I was resting from fear. That evening, my daughter came into my room without knocking. "You've been very quiet," she said. I looked at her calmly. "Isn't that what you wanted?" She frowned. "You're being strange." "I'm being careful," I replied. She crossed her arms. You don't need to worry about things you don't understand. I met her eyes. I understand more than you think. She stiffened. What do you mean by that? She asked. I smiled slightly. Nothing. But my heart was pounding. That night, I heard whispers again. They're coming soon, my son said. How soon? My daughter asked. Soon enough, he replied. My stomach dropped. Coming. Who was coming? I lay in bed, my heart racing, staring at the ceiling. Whatever they had planned. Whatever those papers were preparing for. It was closer than I thought. And now that I knew the truth, there was no going back. Because the next step they took would force me to either disappear quietly or finally use the voice they were so afraid of. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I did not sleep after hearing those words. They're coming soon. The sentence sat heavy in my chest, like a stone that would not move. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Every sound felt sharp. The floor creaked. The wind brushed the window. Somewhere far away, a car passed. Who was coming? And why did they sound so sure? By morning, my eyes burned from staying open all night, but my mind was clear in a way it had never been before. Fear had stopped spinning me around. It had settled into something else. Focus. I got out of bed slowly and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older than she did a week ago, not because of age, but because she had finally seen the truth. You see now, I whispered. In the kitchen, my daughter was already there. She was talking on her phone in a low voice. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call. Morning, Mom, she said, too bright. Morning, I replied. She watched me closely as I poured tea like she was checking for cracks, for weakness, for tears. I gave her none. You didn't sleep, she said. I slept enough, I replied. She nodded, relieved. Good. That word again. Good meant quiet. Good meant not asking questions. My son walked in a few minutes later. He didn't look at me. We'll be busy today, he said, so don't worry if we're in and out. In and out where? I asked. He hesitated just a moment. Just errands. Errands. That word felt dangerous now. I nodded and said nothing. They both left soon after, the door closing behind them like a decision being made. I stood there alone in the kitchen, the house suddenly feeling larger and smaller at the same time. Larger because I could breathe. Smaller because I knew something was closing in. I went back to my room and opened my notebook. I wrote everything I had heard the night before. I wrote the words there, coming soon in big letters. I underlined them twice. Because people who plan in secret depend on you forgetting. I would not forget. That afternoon, my grandson came home early. He dropped his bag by the door and looked around. Where's Mom? He asked. Out, I replied. He nodded and sat beside me. He was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, They've been talking a lot. I looked at him. About what? About you, he said. My chest tightened. What do they say? He hesitated. They say you're tired, that you don't see things clearly. I smiled sadly. Do you think that's true? He shook his head. You're just different now. Different. Yes, I said, I am. That evening, my children came home together. They looked tense, focused, like people who had checked something off a list. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Finally, my son spoke. We need to talk, he said. I set my fork down. Then talk. He took a deep breath. We've made arrangements. Arrangements. My heart began to pound. For what? I asked. My daughter spoke this time. For support. What kind of support? I asked. She avoided my eyes. Extra help. With what? I pressed. She sighed. With decisions. There it was again. I make my own decisions, I said calmly. My son leaned forward. That's the thing, you don't always need to. I felt something cold move through my body. When did you decide that? I asked. They exchanged a look. That's what worries us, my daughter said. You don't see it. I looked at both of them. You locked a room in my house. You made plans without me, and you think I don't see clearly. My son's jaw tightened. You're twisting things. No, I replied. I'm numbing them. Silence fell. Then my daughter said something that made my stomach drop. They'll be here tomorrow. My fork slipped from my hand. Who? I asked. She hesitated. They're just coming to check in, she said. Check in. My heart raced. You called someone, I said. She didn't deny it. You talked about me, I continued. My son looked away. You decided I couldn't speak for myself, I said. My daughter's voice shook. We're scared. So am I replied. But fear does not give you ownership of my life. That night, I packed a small bag. Not to run. To be ready. I put my notebook inside, my identification, a few personal things, proof of who I was. I locked my bedroom door and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. They wanted me to be quiet, I whispered. But now my silence had a purpose. Morning came too fast. I was already dressed when I heard a knock at the front door. Not loud. Professional. My heart began to pound. My daughter rushed down the hallway. Wait. The knock came again. My son looked at me. You don't have to do this. I do, I replied. I walked to the door and opened it. Two people stood outside. A man and a woman. Both holding folders. Both wearing polite smiles. Mrs. Bellamy, the woman asked. Yes, I replied. We're here to talk. Behind me, I could feel my children holding their breath. I stepped aside and let them in. And as the door closed, I knew one thing for sure. This was the moment they wanted my voice gone. And the next words I spoke would decide everything. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They stepped into my house like it was already decided. Not rude. Not loud. Just calm in a way that made my skin prickle. The woman smiled first. She was about my daughter's age, maybe a little older. Her hair was pulled back tight, neat like she didn't want a single thing out of place. The man beside her held a folder close to his chest, like it was something fragile. Mrs. Bellamy, the woman said gently, thank you for letting us in. I nodded. You're welcome. My voice sounded steady. That surprised me. They looked around the living room, their eyes moving from the couch to the family photos on the wall. The picture of me holding my children when they were small. The picture of my late husband smiling in his work shirt. The chair by the window where I spent most afternoons. The chair they thought I belonged in. Please have a seat, my daughter said quickly. The visitors sat. I did not. I'll stand, I said. The woman glanced at me. That's perfectly fine. She opened her folder. The sound of paper sliding against paper felt loud in the quiet room. We're here today because concerns were shared, she said. Concerns. I looked at my children. They stared at the floor. Concerns about what? I asked. About your well-being, the man replied. His voice was calm, practiced. I am well, I said. The woman smiled politely. We just want to check in. Check in. I crossed my arms slowly, then ask. They did. My full name. My age. The date. I answered without trouble. Where I lived. Who lived with me. What I ate. I answered calmly. As they spoke, I felt my daughter watching me, watching for cracks, watching for confusion. It didn't come. Do you feel safe here? The woman asked. I paused. Yes, I said, but I feel pressured. The room went still. My daughter's head snapped up. Mom. I'm answering, I said gently. The woman nodded and wrote something down. Can you explain what you mean by pressured? She asked. I've been asked to be quiet, I said, to stop asking questions, to let others decide for me. My son shifted. We're just trying to help. I didn't say you weren't, I replied. I said you didn't ask. The man cleared his throat. Have you signed any documents recently? No, I said. I reached into my handbag and pulled out my notebook. I keep notes, I continued, because people kept telling me I was tired. The woman took the notebook and flipped through it slowly. Her smile faded. These are very detailed, she said. I wanted to remember, I replied. The man leaned forward. Do you feel you understand what's happening around you? Yes, I said, very clearly. My daughter let out a shaky breath. The woman closed the notebook. From what we see today, Mrs. Bellamy is alert and aware. My heart lifted slightly. We don't see immediate cause for intervention, the man added. My son's face went pale. But, my daughter started. We'll document today's visit, the woman said. Any future steps should include transparency. Transparency. They stood up. As they walked toward the door, the woman turned back to me. If you ever feel pressured again, she said softly, you have the right to speak. I know, I replied. The door closed behind them. The silence that followed was heavy. Then my daughter exploded. You embarrassed us, she shouted. You went too far, my son said. I sat down slowly, my legs finally weak. I told the truth, I said. My daughter paced the room. You didn't have to show them that notebook. I had to protect myself, I replied. You made this worse, my son said. For who? I asked. Neither of them answered. That night, they barely spoke to me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart racing again. I knew this wasn't over. People who plan like that don't stop, because one door closes. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You complicated things. Another message followed. This won't be the last conversation. My hands shook as I turned the phone off. They wanted me to be quiet, I whispered. But now they're angry I spoke. The next morning, I woke up to raised voices. My children were arguing in the kitchen. We need another way, my daughter said. We can't stop now, my son replied. Another way. My heart began to pound. Because whatever they meant by that sounded worse than before. And deep down I knew. The real fight had not started yet. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I stayed in my room for a long time after I heard them arguing in the kitchen. Their voices rose and fell, sharp and tired, like people pulling on the same rope from different sides. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. We can't stop now. There has to be another way. She made us look bad. Those words sat heavy in my chest. I pressed my hand there and breathed slowly, counting each breath like I used to when my children were small and scared. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Calm your body first, then your mind. I had done that for them my whole life. Now I was doing it for me. When the house finally went quiet, I stood up and looked around my room. The bed, the dresser, the small chair by the window where I used to sit and pray when the nights felt too long. This room had held me together through many storms. I picked up my notebook and opened it to a blank page. I wrote the date. Then I wrote one sentence. They are not done. Seeing it on paper made my stomach turn, but it also made my thoughts sharper. Fear does that sometimes. It cuts through the fog. I heard a soft knock at my door. Mom, my daughter's voice said. I did not answer right away. Another knock. Mom, can we talk? I walked to the door and opened it. She stood there with her arms folded tight, her eyes red like she had been crying. For a moment, I saw my little girl again. The one who used to crawl into my bed after bad dreams. But that girl was not here right now. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked. She sighed and stepped inside. "This can't go on like this." I nodded. "I agree." She looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "I can't keep pretending nothing is wrong." She sat on the edge of the bed. "We were just trying to help." "You keep saying that," I replied, "but help doesn't feel like pressure." She rubbed her face. "You don't understand how hard this is for us." I sat down across from her. "I understand more than you think." She shook her head. "You don't see what we see." "And you don't see what I feel," I said. She looked at me then, really looked, and something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, fear, maybe both. "We're scared," she whispered. "What if something happens to you?" "Something already happened," I replied. "You stopped listening." Her shoulders slumped. "We don't want to lose you." I leaned forward. "And I don't want to lose myself." The room went quiet. She stood up suddenly. "This isn't over." "No," I said, "it is." She left without another word. That night, I slept with my door locked again. I did not like that I had to, but I listened to my body. My body knew before my heart did. In the early hours of the morning, my phone buzzed. I opened my eyes slowly and reached for it. Unknown number. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening the message. "We're concerned about your resistance." Resistance. Like I was something fighting back. Another message came. "This could get complicated if you don't cooperate." My hands shook as I set the phone down. Cooperate. That word again. It was not a request. It was a warning. I sat up in bed and whispered my name out loud. "Esther." Hearing it steadied me. I got up before anyone else and went to the kitchen. I made tea and sat at the table, watching the sun rise through the window. The light came in slow and soft, like it always had. The world was still turning. No matter what they planned. When my son came into the kitchen, he stopped when he saw me sitting there. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," I replied. He poured coffee and leaned against the counter. "We need to figure this out." "We do," I said. He sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "People are starting to ask questions." "Good," I replied. "Questions are how truth comes out." He frowned. "You don't know what you're risking." I looked at him calmly. "I know exactly what I'm risking." My voice. My son stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Later that day, my grandson came to sit with me in the living room. He looked nervous, like he was carrying something heavy. "Grandma," he said, "are you okay?" "I am," I replied. "Are you?" He shrugged. "Mom says you're being stubborn." I smiled sadly. "Is that what she calls it when someone speaks up?" He frowned. "She says you're scared." "I was," I admitted, "but I'm not anymore." He looked confused. "What changed?" I took his hand gently. I remembered who I am. That afternoon, my daughter and son left the house together again. No explanation, no goodbye. I watched their car disappear down the street. My heart told me this was not errands. This was planning. I went back to my room and packed a small bag, not because I planned to leave, but because I wanted to be ready. I put my notebook inside, my identification, a few old photos, things that proved my life belonged to me. As I zipped the bag, I heard the front door open. Footsteps. Then voices. "They're moving fast," my daughter said. "We have to," my son replied. "She's not backing down." "She spoke to them already," my daughter said. "What if she speaks again?" My heart pounded. "Then we do it before she can," my son said. "Do what?" My breath caught in my throat. I pressed my ear closer to the door, careful not to make a sound. "We can't wait," my daughter continued. "If she tells more people, we lose control." Lose control. There it was. Not love. Control. When? My son asked. Soon, she replied. Very soon. I stepped back from the door, my legs shaking. Whatever they were planning, it was close. Too close. I sat on my bed and pressed my hands together, trying to think clearly. I had a choice. Stay silent and hope it passed. Or speak now and risk everything. I opened my notebook and wrote one more sentence. Silence is no longer safe. That night, I barely slept. At dawn, there was a knock at the front door. Not gentle. Firm. Professional. My heart began to pound as I sat up in bed. I heard my daughter's voice in the hallway. They're here. Here. I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite the fear in my chest. Whatever was happening, this was the moment they had been waiting for. And now so was I. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I was already standing when the knock came again. My heart was beating fast, but my hands were steady. That surprised me. A few days ago, I would have been shaking, begging for this to stop. Now something else had taken over. Clarity. I walked out of my room and into the hallway. My daughter stood near the front door, her face pale. My son was beside her, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor like he was trying not to think. They're here, my daughter whispered again, even though I had already heard the knock. I know, I said. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear for me. Fear of losing control. You don't have to talk, she said quickly. We can handle this. No, I replied. You can't. The knock came a third time. I walked past them and opened the door. Two people stood outside. A man and a woman, different from the last pair. Younger, sharper. They both wore calm smiles, the kind that never reached the eyes. Each held a folder. Mrs. Bellamy, the woman asked. Yes, I said. May we come in? I stepped aside. As they entered my home, I felt something heavy settle in my chest, not fear, but anger. Slow, steady anger. The kind that comes when someone tries to take what is not theirs. They stood in the living room, looking around like they were already memorizing details. The couch, the photos, me. The man spoke first. We've been asked to follow up. By who? I asked. He smiled politely. We can't share that. I nodded. Then I'll answer carefully. My daughter shifted uncomfortably. Mom. I will speak, I said without raising my voice. The woman opened her folder. We're here to assess the situation. Assess? Like I was an object. What situation? I asked. Concerns about your ability to make decisions, she replied smoothly. There it was. I looked at my children. Neither of them spoke. Who said I can't? I asked. The man glanced at my son. My son looked away. I make my own decisions, I said. I always have. The woman nodded slowly, writing something down. Do you feel anyone is pressuring you? Yes, I replied. My daughter stepped forward. That's not fair. I turned to her. Then tell them the truth. She froze. The man asked, Can you explain what you mean by pressure? I took a deep breath. I was asked to be quiet. I was told to stop asking questions. I found plans made about my life without my consent. The woman looked up. Plans. Yes, I said. Written plans. My son spoke sharply. She went into a room she wasn't supposed to. I looked at him calmly. It's my house. The woman's pen stopped moving. Mrs. Bellamy, she said, have you signed any documents? No, I replied. Were you asked to? Yes. Silence fell. My daughter's voice trembled. We were trying to help. The man looked between us. Help requires consent. That sentence landed hard. The woman closed her folder. We need to speak with Mrs. Bellamy alone. My daughter's eyes widened. That's not necessary. It is, the woman replied calmly. I'm staying, my son said. I shook my head. No, you're not. They both stared at me. This is my voice, I continued. You don't get to sit in it. Reluctantly, they stepped into the hallway. The door closed. The room felt smaller without them, but lighter. The woman leaned forward. Mrs. Bellamy, are you afraid of your children? I thought about it. No, I said. I am afraid of losing myself. The man nodded. That matters. They asked me more questions about my health, my memory, my daily life. I answered everything. Clearly, calmly, without confusion. When they finished, the woman said something I did not expect. You are not the person we were told about. My heart skipped. What were you told? She hesitated, then said that you were forgetful, emotional, easily influenced. I almost laughed. That's what happens when you stop being convenient, I said. The man closed his folder. We will document this. The door opened again, and my children returned. Their faces were tense. We don't see cause to move forward at this time, the woman said. Mrs. Bellamy is capable and aware. My daughter's breath caught. This isn't over, my son said quietly. The man looked at him. It should be. They left soon after. The door closed. Silence filled the house again. My daughter turned to me, tears in her eyes. Why are you doing this? I looked at her, because I am still alive. My son shook his head. You're tearing this family apart. No, I replied. I'm putting it back together honestly. That night they stayed away from me, doors closed, voices low. I sat in my room, my notebook open, writing everything down again. Because I knew something they didn't. People who try this once rarely stop. And sure enough, my phone buzzed near midnight. Unknown number. You are making this very difficult. Another message followed. You should reconsider before things go too far. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Too far. I turned the phone face down. They wanted me to be quiet, I whispered, and now they're afraid I won't be. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, knowing deep in my bones that this was not the end. It was the middle. Because the next move would not come from strangers. It would come from my own blood. And whatever they tried next would force me to choose between peace and truth. And this time, I knew which one I would choose. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. That night, the house did not sleep. It was quiet, yes, but it was the kind of quiet that feels sharp, like something is waiting to happen. Doors stayed closed. Footsteps were careful. Voices stayed low. I sat on my bed with my notebook open, writing slowly so my hands would not shake. I wrote everything. What they asked. What I answered. What the woman said about the person they were told I was. Forgetful, emotional, easily influenced. I stared at those words for a long time. That was the version of me my children had shared with the world. Not the woman who raised them. Not the woman who worked 2 jobs. Not the woman who held the family together when their father died. Just a quiet old woman who should stop talking. I closed the notebook and placed it beside my pillow. Sleep came in pieces, short, broken moments where my mind kept waking itself up. Just before morning, I heard movement in the hallway. Soft steps. Then my daughter's voice, barely above a whisper. She can't keep doing this. My son replied, just as low. She's stronger than we thought. That's the problem, she said. People believe her. People believe her. I pressed my hand to my chest. That was the truth they were struggling with. When morning came, I got dressed and opened my bedroom door like nothing was wrong. My daughter was already in the kitchen, standing by the sink, staring out the window. My son sat at the table, his phone in his hand, jaw tight. No one spoke at first. I poured myself tea and sat down. Finally, my son looked up. We need to set some boundaries. I almost smiled. Boundaries, I asked. Yes, he said, for everyone's sake. For whose sake? I asked. He hesitated. Yours. I nodded slowly. Then I'll go first. They both looked at me. My boundary, I said calmly, is that no one makes plans about my life without me. My daughter sighed. That's not realistic. It's necessary, I replied. My son leaned forward. You don't see how this looks. I see exactly how it looks, I said. It looks like I stopped being useful to you. That hit harder than I expected. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. Neither was asking me to disappear quietly, I replied. She wiped her face angrily. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm saying them out loud. Silence fell again. Then my son said something that made my stomach tighten. We've talked to someone else. My heart skipped. Who? He looked at my daughter. She looked at the table. A family friend, she said. Someone we trust. I felt a cold wave move through me. What did you tell them? I asked. That we're worried, she replied. About what? I pressed. She swallowed. About your stubbornness. That word again. Stubbornness. A softer way of saying resistance. A nicer way of saying disobedient. And what did this friend suggest? I asked. My son spoke quietly. That we protect ourselves. From me, I asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I stood up slowly and picked up my notebook. You keep calling this love, I said, but love does not need secrets. My daughter stood up too. You don't understand how scared we are. I do, I replied. You're scared because you're losing control. Her face hardened. That's not true, she said. Then unlock the room, I replied. The words hung in the air like smoke. My son stood up abruptly. That's not happening. Then stop calling this care, I said. I walked out of the kitchen and back to my room, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Behind my door, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. They were not backing down. They were adjusting. That afternoon, my phone rang. Not an unknown number this time. A familiar name. My sister. I hadn't heard from her in months. Hello, I answered. Esther, she said slowly, what's going on? My chest tightened. What do you mean? I got a call, she replied, from your daughter. I closed my eyes. What did she say? I asked. She said you're confused, my sister continued. That you're pushing people away, that you need help. I felt something crack inside me. And what do you think? I asked. There was a long pause. I don't know, my sister said honestly. That's why I'm calling you. I took a deep breath, then listened to me. And I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet. Then she said something that made my knees weak. That doesn't sound like confusion. No, I whispered. It sounds like control. That evening, my daughter stormed into my room. You called Auntie, she demanded. No, I replied. She called me. You embarrassed us again, she said. I told the truth, I replied. You're turning people against us, she said. I'm letting people hear me, I replied. She stared at me, breathing hard. This is getting ugly, she said. It already was, I replied softly. You just didn't see it when I was quiet. She left without another word. That night, my son did not come home. My daughter paced the house, talking on the phone in low, angry whispers. I sat in my room, writing. Because deep down, I knew what was coming next. When control slips, people reach for something bigger. Something louder. Something final. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You are creating serious problems. Then another message came. This needs to end. My hands shook as I read it. End. That word scared me more than anything else. I locked my door and sat on my bed, my heart racing. They wanted me to be quiet, I whispered. But now they want me gone. Outside my door, I heard my daughter crying. Inside my chest, I felt something shift. Whatever they were planning next. It wasn't small, and it wasn't gentle. And I knew one thing for sure. The moment they tried to silence me again would be the moment I spoke the loudest. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I did not sleep that night. The word end stayed in my head like a drum that would not stop beating. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to my daughter move around the house. I could hear her footsteps packing, the soft opening and closing of doors, the low sound of her voice on the phone. Every sound told me the same thing. They were still working. I sat up slowly and placed my feet on the floor. The house felt different now, not like a home, like a place where decisions were being made without my consent. Again, I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street looked the same, trees still, cars parked, a normal morning waiting to arrive. It hurt to see how calm the world could be when my own life felt like it was being pulled apart. They wanted me to be quiet, I whispered, but quiet is dangerous now. At sunrise, I dressed carefully. Not in a rush, not shaking. I chose simple clothes, comfortable, clean, clothes that felt like me. I brushed my hair and looked at myself in the mirror. You are still here, I told my reflection, no matter what they say. I packed my small bag again. Notebook, identification, a few photos, the same things. I kept them close, like proof that I existed beyond the story they were telling about me. When I walked into the kitchen, my daughter was already there. Her eyes were red. Her face looked tight, like she had not slept either. We need to talk, she said. We've been talking, I replied calmly. She rubbed her forehead. This is getting out of hand. It got out of hand when you stopped listening, I said. She slammed her hand lightly on the counter. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly, I replied. You are trying to make me disappear quietly. She stared at me, breathing hard. That's not true. Then stop telling people I'm confused, I said. She looked away. That was enough of an answer. My son came home later that morning. He walked in without greeting me and went straight to the living room. I followed him and sat across from him. We need honesty, I said. He laughed bitterly. Now you want honesty. I always did, I replied. He looked at me then, his eyes tired. You're tearing this family apart. I shook my head slowly. No, I stopped holding it together by myself. Silence fell between us. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. People are watching now. Good, I replied. Let them. He leaned forward. You don't know what people will believe. I know what the truth is, I said. He stood up suddenly. You think truth protects you? Yes, I replied. Eventually. He shook his head. You're wrong. Those words stayed with me long after he left the room. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was not an unknown number. It was someone I trusted. A neighbor. Esther, she said softly, are you okay? My heart skipped. Why do you ask? I heard some things, she replied. Your daughter mentioned you're not well. I closed my eyes. I am well, I said. I am just not silent anymore. There was a pause. Then she said, that's not what it sounds like. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. Not all of it, just enough. When I finished, she was quiet. Thank you for telling me, she said. I was worried. Now you know why, I replied. After the call ended, my hands shook. They were spreading their story. That evening, my daughter confronted me again. Why are you calling people? She asked. I'm answering calls, I replied. There's a difference. You're turning everyone against us, she said. I'm letting people see me, I replied. Her face hardened. This has to stop. I looked at her calmly. Then stop lying. She stepped closer. You don't know how far this can go. I met her eyes. Neither do you. That night, I locked my door and placed my bag beside my bed. I wrote in my notebook until my hand hurt, because something inside me understood now. When people lose control quietly, they try loudly next. Near midnight, I heard my children talking again. Low, urgent. "She's not backing down," my daughter said. "Then we can't wait," my son replied. "Wait for what?" My heart began to race. "We need to make this official," my daughter said. Official. That word made my stomach turn. "If we don't," my son said, "she'll tell everyone." "And then we lose everything," my daughter replied. Lose everything. That told me more than they realized. This was not about my safety. This was about their image, their plans, their comfort. I sat on my bed, my hands pressed together, my breathing slow and controlled. Fear tried to rise. I pushed it down, because I had reached the part of the story where fear could no longer help me. Only truth could. The next morning, a car pulled into the driveway early. Not my son's. Not my daughter's. Another car. My heart started pounding. I looked out the window and saw two people stepping out. Not the same ones as before. Different. Older. More serious. One of them held a clipboard. My daughter rushed down the hallway. "They're here," she said, her voice shaking. I stood up slowly. "Who?" I asked. She hesitated. "People who can make this stop," she replied. "Make what stop?" My voice. My truth. My life as I knew it. I picked up my bag and my notebook. My hands were steady. My heart was not. I walked toward the front door as the knock came. Firm. Final. I looked back at my children. "You wanted me quiet," I said softly. "But this is where I speak." I reached for the door handle. And before I opened it, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever they planned to do next would change everything. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I stood still for a moment before opening the door. My hand rested on the handle, and I felt how cold the metal was, not because the house was cold, but because this moment carried weight, the kind of weight that changes lives. Behind me, my daughter was crying softly. My son stood stiff, his face tight, like he was bracing for something to break. I took a deep breath. Not a scared one. A steady one. Then I opened the door. Two people stood outside, a man and a woman, both older, both calm, both with faces that had seen many stories like mine. "Mrs. Bellamy?" the woman asked. "Yes," I said. "We'd like to speak with you," the man added. "I'm listening," I replied. They stepped inside. The house felt different the moment they crossed the door. Not heavier, not lighter. Clearer. They did not rush. They did not smile too much. They looked around like people who understood that walls hold memories. "We're here because there have been repeated reports," the woman said gently. "About me," I replied. "Yes," she said, "and about concern." I nodded. Concern has many faces. She looked at me carefully. "We want to hear your voice." That sentence almost made me cry. We sat in the living room. My daughter and son sat across from me, not beside me, across. That distance mattered. The man asked simple questions. My name, my age, how long I had lived in this house. I answered calmly. He asked about my health, my memory, my daily life. I answered clearly. Then he asked, "Do you feel anyone has tried to silence you?" I did not hesitate. "Yes," I said. The room went quiet. I spoke slowly, carefully. I told them about being told to stop asking questions, about plans made without me, about the locked room, about people being told I was confused. I did not shout. I did not cry. I told the truth. When I finished, the woman looked at my children. "Is this accurate?" she asked. My daughter opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "We were trying to help," she said weakly. The woman nodded. "Help without consent is control." That sentence fell like a stone. The man turned to me. "Mrs. Bellamy, do you feel capable of making your own decisions?" "Yes," I said, "and I want to." He nodded. "That's clear." They spoke quietly to each other for a moment. Then the woman turned back to us. "We do not see reason for further action," she said. "Mrs. Bellamy is aware, capable, and in control of her choices." My daughter's face drained of color. My son looked down at the floor. The woman continued. "Any future steps involving her life must include her fully. Otherwise, that becomes a serious concern." They stood to leave. Before walking out, the woman looked at me again. "You did the right thing by speaking," she said softly. "I know," I replied. The door closed. And just like that, the power shifted. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But completely. My daughter burst into tears. "We were scared," she cried. "We didn't know what to do." I looked at her calmly. "You should have talked to me." My son's voice was low. "You made us look terrible." I shook my head slowly. "You did that yourselves." Silence filled the room. Then I said the words I had been holding in my chest for years. "I stayed quiet to keep peace," I said. "But peace that costs you your voice is not peace." They did not argue. They could not. Because the truth had finally been spoken, where it could not be twisted. That evening, my children left the house. Not angry. Not loud. Just heavy. I sat alone in the living room as the sun went down, the light spilling softly across the floor. The same light that had been there every evening of my life. But this time, it felt different. It felt like it belonged to me. In the days that followed, things changed. Slowly. People called me directly. Neighbors checked in. Family asked me questions instead of speaking around me. My children came back later, carefully, respectfully. We talked. Not everything healed, but everything became honest. And honesty is where real love begins. One morning, as I sat by the window, I whispered the truth that had carried me through everything. They wanted me to be quiet. I smiled softly. But I found my voice. And I will never give it back. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Somewhere out there, I might be reading.